justice and truth, to live with honor, to protect the weak and the poor, and to love your mother.
My friend Kenan said it was to crush our enemies and to hear the lamentations of their women.
We are Magi, son, not barbarians.
Welcome back, History Gamers. Today we're going to be looking at Ubisoft Montreal's Assassin's Creed Origins. The game is set in Egypt's late Ptolemaic period, around 49 BCE. And for those who do not know what BCE is, it stands for Before the Common Era. Basically, a less religious way to...
Get on with it!
Come on, get on with it! Right. You follow Bayek and his quest for revenge against those who killed his son. The game is beautiful, and I found it more fun and challenging than previous Assassin's Creed games. So without further ado, let's jump in.
You killed my master and left me for dead! That was a mistake!
Your master was a murderer.
I am his sworn bodyguard! It's a question of honor!
I am the Magi of Siwa.
Then you are a worthy opponent!
Magi is a name that appears in Egyptian and Kushite texts. Going back as far as 2300 BCE, the term might have referred to an ethnic group of pastoral people, meaning nomads, and or a separate tribe from Nubia and southern Egypt. Study is still being done, but around 1500 BCE, some Magi probably formed an Egyptian military unit, and the term went from being the name of a group to the name of a job. The term stopped showing up in records around 1050 BCE, more than 1,000 years before the game's time period. Bayek must have really liked that title.
Now may I go to my glory.
There is no glory left in Egypt.
Here is when he crowned Ptolemy Legos as his successor.
So the rule of the Ptolemies began, and the Magi's ended. Magi's disappeared because of him.
You cannot blame one.
Okay, so at the time of the game, Egyptians no longer rule Egypt. The game makes the Egyptians talk like the transfer of power was yesterday, but the Egyptian rule ended nearly 300 years before. Alexander the Great steamrolled into Egypt, took over, and had a city built in his honor, Alexandria. Not a modest one, was he? When he died, the general that took over was Ptolemy of Lugas, or Ptolemy the Savior, and created the dynasty. Being of Macedonian and Greek origin, these were the whiter of the pharaohs of Egypt, but undoubtedly mixed with native Egyptians throughout the years. Making Egypt the center of the Greek world, the Greeks saw the native Egyptians as rustic and stupid. No wonder the Egyptians didn't like them.
Those lying Greeks are working us to death, tearing down our own temples. This is what their culture means, the death of Egypt and Egyptians.
Cleopatra was actually the 7th woman named so, yet she was the most famous one because she was the last. Her line in the game, "Make it so," is probably one of the signatures that she herself actually wrote on official documents from the time period.
Enough of the big words, little brother.
Have you seen my Book of the Dead in your travels, Magi? I went all the way to Memphis to buy it.
No. How was it lost?
Bandits. They came from the dunes nearby. When their leader saw how I cared for the book, he wrenched it from me. I thought my heart would stop.
I can help. I do not fear them.
I have been praying for someone like you. That book will unite me with my wife's spirit.
So a mission in the game has you look for an old man's Book of the Dead. Rather than being used only by priests, Books of the Dead were actually sold to people. It would help people find their way to the Field of Reeds, a heaven that was basically Egypt anyway, but more perfect. The book contained personalized spells to protect the buyer for getting through the dangers and judgment of the afterlife. Books of the Dead were big business, and the more expensive the better. This undoubtedly led to thieves who would steal them to sell to tourists, and for those who wanted them on the cheap. Some things never change.
brother of Seth, who murdered him. It is said that Iset's tears for her beloved husband created denial.
Egyptians had a lot of gods is an understatement. Egyptians having so many gods that they couldn't remember them all is more accurate. The gods even had popularity contests and name changes just to add to the confusion. For example, there was Ra, the sun god, then he merged with Horus to become the god of the sky and earth, and then later fused again with Amun to become Amun-Ra. Each city, big and small, had their own god too generally. The more prosperous the city became, the more powerful the god became. So, Amun-Ra later got bumped over for Aten. Talk about job security. Temples were built to make the gods happy. Temples themselves were not only religious places, but town centers, places of education and civil duties. I wonder how those town hall meetings must have looked like with a god or two looking over everyone.
Tell me more of the Natron. Enough! At Nehi's house, he showed me strange writings.
Nothing to worry you, friend. 3 others have said the same thing, but these signs are too old to be made sense of.
Passing through, but looking into a mystery. Did you find ancient hieroglyphs in your house?
Didn't everyone? Didn't worry me much. Why? Does it mean something?
So let's get this straight. Egypt is old, as in one of the first civilizations. We see what you did, Ubisoft. Egypt was ancient even when Greece and Rome were the hip modern powers of their times. You can see that in some of the tombs and cities Bayek passes through that the old writing, the hieroglyphs, cannot be read by the Egyptians at the time of the game just because they are too old. Hieroglyphs had everyday messages as well as great stories, but they were given mystic meanings by, you guessed it, the Greeks, who named the writing hieroglyph, or sacred words. Egypt's first united kingdoms took hold around 7,000 years ago. Since the culture is so old, ancient Egyptian culture has often been mislabeled or misunderstood by the newer cultures passing through, and by Egyptians, like in the game, too distant from the old ways to remember. Real quick, I just want to note I appreciate the small details. Many common ancient Egyptians slept on their roofs, and this was to protect against scorpions and other creatures that may be trouble on the ground. Also, mummification used to only be for the pharaoh back in the First Kingdom, but then through time, officials wanted it too. And eventually, if you could afford it, many commoners tried for the smaller and cheaper mummification process by Bayek's time. And lastly, Egypt had a respect for women. Women often stood equal to men and could have legal rights to land and divorce, which encouraged a husband and wife team rather than one spouse dominating the other.
I am Medjay to no Pharaoh. You see this? I can read my own name, Nat! We will find you. We will find you in your sleep! Sleep? I never sleep. I just wait in the shadows, and I will kill you all! Everyone who sniffed the air that day in Siwa!
Well, that's our show. Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, click that like button and subscribe. Leave any questions, comments, or game recommendations below, and remember, never stop learning. This is HBTG, I'm the Lone Pine Wolfman, Eric, and I'll see you guys next time.